Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.
Like, I saw the Phantom Menace, I think 9 times at the cinema. Like, it remains the film, any film that I've seen the most times at the movies.
Wow.
Because I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Hello there. This is Dave, and you're listening to What Does Star Wars Mean to You, the show where we talk to all kinds of fans of Star Wars. From industry insiders to indie artists, from mega collectors to obsessive mythologists, to find out how Star Wars impacted their life. Here's the thing, there's a lot of ways to look at Star Wars, and it's all from a certain point of view, and that point of view is yours. Now, I've always loved hearing people's passionate points of view on Star Wars because, for me, it reveals new ways of looking at the franchise. Also, let's just face it, it's fun to talk Star Wars. Today, my guest's debut novel, Empire State, was SciFiNow's Book of the Year, as well as a Financial Times Book of the Year, and he hasn't stopped since. He's written tie-in novels for such geek favorite franchises as Stranger Things, Elementary, and the Dishonored video game. He's the co-creator of the Archie Comics superhero, The Shield, and has contributed prose fiction to the world of Image Comics' Lazarus. He created the Spider-Wars series and the Ray Electromatic mystery series. And, in a galaxy far, far away, he's written stories for all 3 Star Wars anthologies from a certain point of view. That includes A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, as well as Star Wars adventures from IDW Comics. His debut Star Wars novel was the instant New York Times bestseller, Shadow of the Sith. Let's give a warm hello there to Adam Christopher.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Tell me, Adam, are you ready to share with the world what does Star Wars mean to you?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm always ready.
Good. That's really exciting. I really enjoyed the book, and we'll talk about it. Let's start with 5 with the Force. This is a basic 5 questions I ask all my guests to kind of get their Star Wars saga baseline. So, number 1, which Star Wars movie is your go-to favorite?
A New Hope.
And, for this I need a 1d6. 5. What is your favorite alien species from the Star Wars?
This is supposed to be rapid fire. I'm just going to sit here for like 5 minutes and try to pick my favorite.
That's okay.
I think they're called Gand. I think it's Zuckuss's species. They're kind of insectoid.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe they're not Gand. I can't quite remember to look it up. But yeah, I loved Zuckuss and Forlom forever, and that kind of insect thing really kind of creeps me out. So yeah, his species.
Now, did you have them mixed up because of the toy line was mixed up as a kid?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and to this day, Zuckuss is the robot, the droid, and Forlom is the other one. Yeah.
That's it. Because as soon as when you said Zuckuss, my first thought was Forlom. I was like, oh yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's a certain fans of a certain age are forever going to have that kind of burned into their brain.
Exactly. What is your favorite line to quote?
It's got to be, "That's not how the Force works," from Force Awakens, Han Solo to Finn. When they're on Starkiller Base. Yeah, that's just so good. I love that.
That is a good one. That's not how the Force works.
Yeah. It's applicable to any situation. Like in real life, you can just say it.
I have a theory that a lot of Star Wars lines are perfect for the corporate environment. Like if you're in a meeting, you could just lay out anything, any line. The other night, a friend of mine said one of his favorite lines was, "I don't know, fly casual," from Return of the Jedi.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and
you can always, You could always use many Bothans have died to bring us this information at any kind of
Yeah.
corporate meeting situation.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it would probably be quite true if you're in a corporate setting and said
Well,
many Bothans died.
Yeah.
Number 4, can you do any Star Wars impressions or impersonations?
No. No is my answer.
I'll give you a really easy one. This is of one another guest did, and it's a great one. It's the easiest Star Wars impersonation ever. Gonk.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could do Geode.
Oh yeah. Wait.
That's it. That's my impersonation. So Geode is a rock-based life form from the High Republic, like a slab of stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. The language is so complicated; it's incomprehensible to our nervous systems.
I have not started reading the High Republic yet, and I have to dive into it. Besides the movies, what is your favorite Star Wars content? This could be a TV show, a comic book, a novel, a game.
I love George Mann's, I get the title right, Myths and Fables. I'm kind of looking at it on my bookshelf. No, Dark Legends, which I borrowed from for Shadow of the Sith. But I love that kind of, they're kind of like dark fantasy, horror, fairy tales. Not sort of a mix of all those things. They're the kind of legends that people in the Star Wars universe tell to each other. There's a whole series. There's Myths and Legends, and there's the Life Day Treasury. That kind of series of kind of fairy tale books.
Yeah.
But I love kind of dark and scary stuff. So that book for me is like, and it's illustrated and it's really atmospheric.
Is dark and scary something you'd like to see more in the Star Wars world? Kind of like, oh God, I forget what it was called. There was the Zombie Stormtroopers one.
Oh, Death Troopers.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think you can do it. Star Wars is so huge that any kind of genre can fit within it. So you could do a romance, you could do a thriller, you could do a horror. Even what we've seen in like the Disney Plus series, something like Andor. Andor is a completely different genre to Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about a whole galaxy of people and characters and stories. So like you can do that. I personally gravitate towards darker stuff. Shadow of the Sith is kind of dark in places.
Yeah.
But Star Wars is for everybody, and it's for every kind of reader or viewer. That's the great thing. You can, whatever you like, you can find it.
Yeah.
Within Star Wars.
I always found it really interesting or amazing that Star Wars is a genre, but also genre-free unto itself. It's much more of a universe.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it succeeds and why it's survived for so long, because, A New Hope, which is probably my favorite Star Wars movie, maybe. Like, it's kind of everything. It's a science fiction movie, but it's also kind of fantasy because it's like space wizards and laser swords.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of a samurai movie, and it's also a Western, and it's also that kind of old-fashioned swashbuckling film serial type of thing, like Zorro, but it's also kind of the Flash Gordon kind of serial. So the reason why it succeeded is because all these things kind of fit together in a way which, like, on paper kind of looks kind of crazy, but like together, it worked. And then from that, we're sitting here 46 years later.
Yeah.
With both of us with shelves full of Star Wars stuff behind us on the video call. Like, this is how, that's how it is.
It's you attribute the staying power to, I guess, its ability to change with the times as well, to represent current times as well.
Yeah.
It's malleability, I guess.
Yes. Because like A New Hope and then Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, like they are definitely, like A New Hope is definitely a film made in 1977. And it's different to Empire Strikes Back, not just because they had more money and things in Empire, but, it's 3 years later and 2 years later and things have changed. It's interesting when you look at the knockoffs is not the right word, but like the films and things that came out after A New Hope that were kind of trying to capture the same kind of cultural zeitgeist is a big word. It's not zeitgeist. It's like, but trying to capture the whole thing of Star Wars, which is obviously insanely popular and really captured the imagination. But they had different and they had dated because they didn't understand how Star Wars was made. I mean, made as in like the building blocks, the kind of the molecular structure of Star Wars. So you've got things like Battlestar Galactica. I love Battlestar Galactica, but it is absolutely a 1970s TV sci-fi show, like very much so.
Yeah.
Things like the Disney movie Black Hole, which I think was even, I mean, I could be wrong, I think that was even actually designed as a kind of Star Wars ripoff. Not ripoff, but yeah.
Yeah. But,
you know what I mean? It's kind of like
the
inspired by, yeah, exactly. But Black Hole is as good as it is. It's a movie from 19, whatever it is, 79.
78,
like
79,
it looks it and it feels it. Whereas like George Lucas had this thing right from the beginning where Star Wars was a lived-in second-hand universe. A long time ago was kind of like a little cheat almost, and it's all about levers and buttons and little screens that are crackly and kind of grimy. It's kind of the opposite of Star Trek can move with the times because they went from the 60s design, which is like very futuristic, but they've kind of kept that kind of futuristic look. So then it goes to touchscreens and holograms and what we can imagine the 22nd century or whatever it's been. Whereas even modern Star Wars, you look at Andor is a really good example because like Andor looks like a 1970s Star Wars production because it sounds simple, but like it's buttons and levers and really kind of old-fashioned tech. And this is what makes Star Wars kind of really interesting. I think what makes it unique in that you can have this saga and mythology, which spans, for us, it spans 40-something years. And within the universe, it kind of spans hundreds and even thousands of years. And like it's all that same kind of feel and it kind of all fits together. And I think George Lucas knew that at the beginning and it was absolutely the right thing to do. So so it's timeless in a way. You can do a Star Wars story now. Ahsoka. Ahsoka's kind of like, it looks amazing.
Yep.
With the kind of the star map and the kind of the CG and the special effects, but it's still spaceships flying through space and it's still lightsabers, which we had in 1977.
And buttons and levers.
Exactly, yeah, because that is Star Wars. Like Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe, there's no internet.
Yeah.
Like there's no social media. Like these kind of modern concepts kind of don't exist, which make it really kind of fantastical because they've got like fast and light travel and they can go across the galaxy and apparently now they can go between galaxies, but it's kind of it all fits together so well.
And there's no lawyers because every high platform has no railings at all.
Yeah, there's health and safety issues in Star Wars, definitely. Yeah.
So let's start with your own personal Star Wars journey. How were you first exposed to Star Wars, and can you take me through that experience?
So I actually saw Star Wars A New Hope when I was 6 months old, which is
wow.
Well, it's like I don't remember obviously.
Yeah.
So it was I pinned it down to August 1978 because back in those days movies kind of came and went. They'd come out and then go away and then they'd be re-released, and it was a much more fluid sort of release schedule. And this is New Zealand, which is where I'm from. And my dad is a big science fiction fan and he really wanted to see Star Wars. So he took me to Star Wars when I was 6 months old, which is, not a very good idea, but that's the way it was. So I can say that was the first movie I ever saw. The only Star Wars movie I remember seeing in the cinema for the first time, my first memory, is Return of the Jedi. And by that point, I was a Star Wars fan, so I knew what to expect. So at some point, I must have seen Empire Strikes Back at the movies, but I don't remember. I was kind of lucky in two ways. Like my dad worked in advertising, which means he did a lot of business travel to China and Japan and Taiwan, which meant he could buy all these Star Wars toys that you couldn't get in New Zealand. So, and probably for a lot less because New Zealand stuff was very expensive because everything's imported. So I was like super lucky. I had this most amazing Star Wars toy collection and was kind of the envy of everyone at school. And also, being in advertising, he could borrow a VHS machine at the weekend because we had. I don't think we actually got a VHS machine until kind of late 80s. But he could borrow a VHS machine and like on a Friday night, and we used to go to the local video rental store. And this all sounds like super. Talk about a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This is like ancient history for people who are younger than me.
when everything's at a press of a button and you can just watch 20 different Star Wars options, it's really a different world where you had to go to the video rental store, rent the movie, and then go back and pop it in.
And I could talk for hours about video rental stores. But we used to go on a Friday night to choose something for the weekend. But I'd always choose The Empire Strikes Back. And it got to the point where, like, we stopped going because he would just, on the way home on the Friday with the video machine, he would just stop and pick up Empire Strikes Back. And I'd kind of watch it several times on Saturday and Sunday, and then he'd return it on the way to work on Monday.
Oh,
so
wow.
I was fully immersed in Star Wars, which is, I don't know, I'm kind of the right age for it. I was born in 78, so I was just at the right age for Return of the Jedi in the movies. And again, because of the way schedules and releases, I have this feeling it was actually 84 rather than 83. But I can't quite remember because I went with this friend from school and it must have been 84. Yeah, and like I remember, this is like Adam Christopher's Star Wars Nostalgia Hour. I remember Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut had this Return of the Jedi promotion, and they had these, plastic beakers for your soft drink. And I had one of those. And one of those things, like you put it in a dishwasher, and then over time it just became
just
a white, completely blank white plastic. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if I could scour eBay and see if I could find one.
I'm sure you could. It's amazing how a lot of these things kind of just pop up. Are there any collectibles that you're particularly fond of, like from that time?
Well, it's one of those things where I had all these toys, and then of course, as you do, you kind of get rid of them eventually. Get garage sales, and they just kind of disappear. I remember a friend of mine was when we were teenagers. He was super into Star Wars, and I was too cool for Star Wars, so I kind of gave him a lot of my stuff. So I kind of have a
down now.
Well, because I think he's probably still got one. It's funny because there's a toy called the Cap 2, which is this kind of weird two-legged walker thing. They did a series of toys for The Empire Strikes Back where they don't actually appear in the movie, but they were so desperate for more toy sales, they just invented these little things. They're called mini rigs, and the Cap 2 is one of them. And I put the Cap 2 in Shadow of the Sith because I kind of wanted to make it canon, because they're kind of not canon. There's another one called an INT4, which some other writer had put it into a comic. So I think between us, we're kind of trying to put all these little non-canonical things into Star Wars to make them kind of real.
Yeah, the MTV7 is in an episode of, and I don't know if these are canon, but what is that called? Vision, Star Wars Vision Season 2.
Okay, I need to watch that. I know that they put some stuff in Rebels. Like the troop transporter and a couple of other things. It's just kind of cool we get to do this kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, after Return of the Jedi, there wasn't a lot of Star Wars out there until it was re-released and then the prequels. Did you had alluded to being too cool for Star Wars. Did you kind of lose your Star Wars? This is a terrible way of phrasing it, but here's a better way of phrasing it. Was your Star Wars fandom asleep for a certain amount of time and then woke back up?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. So I think you're right. It was asleep. Yeah, so between Return of the Jedi and then the special editions in 97, there was kind of nothing. And then obviously I kind of got older and older, and Star Wars was kind of this dead zone. I mean, I know there was kind of various, the toy lines kind of had revivals, but I was kind of, by that point I was too old for toys. And things like the novels, I know we had the novelizations and like Lando Calrissian Chronicles and things, but things like Heir to the Empire, kind of 1991, I think. Like I have no recollection of ever seeing Star Wars books in bookstores, so that kind of passed me by. My other kind of big fandom is Doctor Who, and I was much more involved with Doctor Who fandom because there was like an organized fan club, and there was a fanzine, and because Doctor Who being such a long-running TV show, in New Zealand, it was on TV kind of repeated constantly. And then we had things like, the BBC were releasing the old stories on VHS. So there's always something new coming. And because I was involved with Doctor Who fandom, and there was a series of novels started in 91, The New Adventures. So again, Doctor Who had finished in 89 and didn't come back until well, 96, there was the Eighth Doctor TV movie, but then, of course, 2005. But again, it was kind of a big period when there was nothing kind of happening. But Doctor Who fandom was like really kind of organized and doing stuff. And I'm sure Star Wars fandom was as well. But in New Zealand, I never saw any kind of organized Star Wars fandom, which kind of like, to kind of keep the flame going.
Yes.
So it just kind of faded away. And I remember we talk about fandom kind of reigniting from 97, the special editions, which like the special edition of New Hope blew me away. I was like, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And then the Phantom Menace, like I saw the Phantom Menace, I think 9 times at the cinema. Like it remains the film, any film that I've seen the most times at the movies.
Wow.
Because I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And again, this is before, before kind of cosplay and again, organized Star Wars fandom. It's like I was going with friends and things, but the cinema was packed. Like every time was completely packed out, and people just loving Phantom Menace, which is still one of my favorite. Like I say, New Hope is my favorite Star Wars movie, but like the Phantom Menace is one I'd go back to as well.
Was there anything else that really reignited your fanhood for it?
Yeah, I think there was, because the thing with the Phantom Menace, especially right at the beginning, it suddenly gives you all this kind of Star Wars stuff that I think I'd forgotten. So when Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are going to the Trade Federation for their negotiations, and they're served by a protocol droid, I think it's TC-14 or TC-16. And that's the kind of thing, it's a silver protocol droid, looks exactly like C-3PO. And it kind of immediately reminded me of all those like background characters and tiny little things that you see for 5 seconds, which is, for me, is like the most amazing thing about Star Wars, especially as a kid. Like my favorite thing when I was younger was Empire Strikes Back, the bounty hunter scene, because you had these bounty hunters who are on screen for like a minute, 30 seconds, but you had all these action figures of each of them. So what I was doing was kind of giving all these split-second characters their own story and their own adventures with the action figures, kind of telling my own versions of stories in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And like from the first couple of scenes of Phantom Menace, that's what you've got. It's like, okay, there's a protocol droid. Somehow that sticks in my mind. This protocol droid that's silver and looks like C-3PO, but speaks with a female voice. So it's like straight away, it's like, yeah, I'm back in Star Wars.
It's funny because as soon as you mentioned that protocol droid, that whole scene popped up into my head. And I remember her coming in, and I can't remember specific words, but I can remember her tone and how she was serving the drinks, and then the gas of that they tried to poison this Jedi with as she's walking out towards the battle droids.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing how these like small characters just stay with you. Do you think you had mentioned creating stories with your action figures? Do you think that in part, like, did you always want to write? Was that a part of inspiring you to write? Did that form kind of how you imagine stories created?
So I think I was quite lucky because my 2 fandoms, for want of a better word, were Doctor Who and Star Wars, like I said. So Doctor Who has this big tradition of kind of written fiction. All the old stories were novelized into target books because, these are the days before VHS. So like you saw it on TV and it was gone. So the only way that you could experience it again was to read the book. So I was kind of like this obsessive collector of Doctor Who books, which is great for my reading, I guess. But Star Wars was toys. So Doctor Who was books, Star Wars was toys. So with Doctor Who, I was reading these books and writing Doctor Who stories at school because I was just like, well, Doctor Who has written stories. So I was kind of writing stories. And then with Star Wars, I never wrote Star Wars stories at school. Because at school, again, maybe I was lucky, we had this was primary school, and I was maybe from sort of age 6 to 10, we had this thing where like after lunch, you would write for 30 minutes. It's called process writing. And again, maybe my school was weird. I don't know. And so for 30 minutes, and I've got some of these books, they still exist. Like I was basically writing Doctor Who fan fiction mixed with kind of ghost stories because I was really into ghosts as well. It's kind of like Doctor Who. And Doctor Who stuff was like, I can identify what episode I was watching on TV that week by what the story is in the book, because I was basically just kind of cobbling together my own version of the TV episode. But I never wrote Star Wars stories there. And I think that's because with the toys, the action figures, I was kind of telling stories that way. Because Doctor Who didn't really have a toy thing, certainly not in New Zealand. Whereas Star Wars was toys. It was all toys. So it's kind of cool. Like I was doing two things. I was doing Doctor Who and I was doing Star Wars in completely different ways, but expanding both of the universes just kind of for myself. And I think that must have started me writing, because that was, as I said, the earliest book I've got that survives is when I was 7, and I've been writing since then. So,
wow. Yeah. It's fascinating how you're right that Star Wars is toys. And I overheard my mom one time saying to a friend on the phone when I was probably like 9 or 10, he just plays with Star Wars toys all day and just makes up all these stories with them. and it is. Playing with toys is like the original fan fiction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, wanted to pop in to give you a spoiler alert. We're going to talk about Adam's book, Shadows of the Sith. We do talk about the storyline and plot, so that's the spoiler alert. Talking about writing, I want to jump into your book because particularly Revenge of the Sith, Shadow of the Sith, because when I started reading it kind of blows me away. The story reframed Rey's setup in that it acts as a bit of a backstory to give the viewer more of an idea of her mind space going into The Force Awakens. And I think that's a big duty. It's a big swing. It's a big story to take on. How did you come up with this? And what were some of the things you wanted to definitely include and definitely avoid?
So I knew from the beginning that Rey's parents they had to be in the book. That was also in the book. It was to tell us, the brief I got was to tell the story that Lando mentions in The Rise of Skywalker, that he and Luke were chasing Ochi and Bestoon. And they said, just go and tell that story. So I knew from the beginning that Rey's parents had to be the main characters in the book, which meant that Rey had to be in the book.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, I guess, dominoes almost. It's like, well, it's not just going to really link into The Rise of Skywalker, it's going to link into the whole sequel trilogy. Yeah. And completely, like you say, reframe. It's like, it puts a new angle on everything we kind of know about Rey's background, which is, it's like, what a huge responsibility. Especially and it's the kind of weird thing. It's like, so Rey's parents, Dathan and Miramir, they're in The Rise of Skywalker for like 5 seconds.
That's right, yes.
They don't even have a name. There's this kind of joke because there's some like trading cards that have been released, and it kind of had stills from Rise of Skywalker, and it had Rey's dad, Rey's mum, didn't even have a name. So I kind of had to create these characters completely from scratch. Except I didn't create them because they're in The Rise of Skywalker. So it's kind of this weird in between where they're not original characters, but they kind of are original characters.
Yeah.
So, and then it was a matter of trying to piece it all together. It's like taking everything we know from the sequel trilogy about Rey and her background and her memories, and not just memories, but her interpretation of her own past, and trying to turn it into something that kind of made logical sense. Because there's a lot of stuff in the sequel trilogy, not just Rise of Skywalker, where you're kind of thinking, well, it couldn't really have happened like that because of this, or well, she thinks that or remembers that, but it kind of had to be like this.
Yeah.
And I think one of the first moments where that kind of really came home was, her memory of Ochi's ship, the Bestoon Legacy. It's she has this memory of watching the ship take off from Jakku.
Yeah.
And it's well, why would she be watching Ochi's ship if Ochi was a bounty hunter who was hunting her? Why is he taking off from Jakku and she's watching it? So the obvious answer was, well, Ochi's not flying that ship, someone else is. So then, well, her parents stole it. Because how would they kind of trying to shake the tail of Ochi? It's well, steal his ship.
Yeah.
And then they're kind of oh, now I can do kind of anything, because if I can reframe things like that, I can make a kind of logical narrative for Rey and her parents that kind of makes sense, but also leads to what we know in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
And for me, that was kind of probably the best bit of the book. Is I got to name her parents, and I got to kind of create these characters. And it was kind of cool because Jodie Comer is the actress who plays Miramir on screen. And she's one of my favorite actresses, and she's in a series called Killing Eve, which is completely amazing. And I loved her in that. And I remember when I saw The Rise of Skywalker for the first time, kind of this bolt of lightning. It's oh my goodness, it's Jodie Comer. But, I didn't know she was going to be in it. And she's only in it for 15 seconds. It's something.
Yeah.
She got two lines of dialogue. But again, this maybe reflects back on those days of playing with the action figures, the bounty hunters and things. It's like, this is a character that is on screen for 15 seconds. We know absolutely nothing about it, not even her name. And I got to tell her story, or part of her story, which is amazing.
It is amazing. And it's also, you do a wonderful job of, I personally think that this story feels like the hardest one to tell because you do have to take so much into account that comes 17 years later, I think, in, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, of the Rey's character. And you can't step on anything with these characters who are meeting each other in the future, like Luke and Rey meeting up on Octo. I always have trouble with
something like that.
Yeah, I have trouble pronouncing that one. Also, at the same time, allowing Lando and Luke to be heroes of their own story in this kind of sequel trilogy prequel, that they need to be heroes, yet they can't succeed. And that you tell a wonderful Lando story within within Shadow of the Sith. It's the of the Sith. I just want to say Revenge of the Sith. In Shadow, you tell a great Lando story, you tell a great Luke story. And I just felt like it was very impressive because I think there's just, a lot of times people say there's a lot of moving pieces. You had a lot of stagnant pieces that you had to work around and kind of thread a needle.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing of writing licensed fiction, which is fiction that exists in another universe that already is established. Part of the job, you have to fit it in, whatever the constraints are. Like that's why they hire you. Your job. They found that they with any kind of tie-in property, they choose their authors carefully because there are very certain criteria for the job. The first tie-ins I wrote were for 2 books for Elementary, the TV series, which is Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu as Holmes and Watson in modern-day New York City. And those 2 books had to fit into the existing TV seasons at particular points. And Stranger Things was even harder because, like a Jim Hopper prequel novel set in 1977, the first sort of science fiction-y supernatural thing that he ever encountered is in season 1 of Stranger Things.
Yes.
Which is set in 1983 or something. So how can you have a Stranger Things novel set in 1977 that somehow still follows through with what we know about Hopper and his life into season 1 of Stranger Things? So that was like a huge challenge. It's like, well, what do I do? Because the other thing with writing licensed fiction is you're really writing maybe more than your own kind of original stuff. You're writing for an audience that have expectations. So when someone, and this is the kind of thing I keep always on the top of my mind, it's like someone is going to walk into a bookstore and they'll see a book that says Star Wars, and it's got a picture of Luke, and it's got a picture of Lando on the front. Immediately, they're expecting a certain kind of book. If they're Star Wars fans or not, or they're kind of casual fans or kind of hardcore, there's expectations about what that book is about. And again, with Stranger Things, it's got Stranger Things logo on the front. It's got a picture of Hopper in 11. There's people are going to go, I love Stranger Things. I love Hopper. I love 11. I'm going to read this book. I love Star Wars. Luke's my favorite character. I'm going to pick this book up and read it. So I'm always kind of got that on my mind. It's like I have a duty to tell a story which is true to what I want to tell as a kind of original story that also fits within the brief that I've been given for that universe, but that also pleases the reader who have expectations about being entertained and informed and kind of learn something about these characters and about the story and about the universe that they're set in. Which is why I love tie-in writing, because of all kind of writing, it's just kind of with Star Wars, it's like a kind of backwards jigsaw puzzle. Yeah. Kind of like I can't remember what I said, like a crossword crossed with a jigsaw puzzle. The way you kind of have to fit it all together, especially with Shadow of the Sith, because we had all that stuff from the sequel trilogy, and I kind of had to backwards engineer, kind of raise memories and things. But I kind of love it, and I love writing tie-in fiction. It does something in my brain. It's like something,
Well, I think it goes back to that feeling of playing and writing like Doctor Who stories and playing with Star Wars figures, where it's that enjoyment of telling a story with characters you know.
Yeah. And there is also, there's an interesting difference between fan fiction and writing licensed fiction. And for some things, and especially the Stranger Things book, I kind of had to pull back on some things because they were like, no, this is a little bit like fan fiction. And they're right. It's like, this is when you can completely overindulge the fan in you and put in so many references and continuity and Easter eggs and things where those things are like, okay, Shadow of the Sith is completely full of those things, but they don't matter. Like, if you know, this is work how deep it goes, if you know the 1978 LA Times comic strip, Star Wars, then there is stuff in Shadow of the Sith. If you don't know that and never heard of the newspaper comic strips, it doesn't matter. You know, I put the Cap 2 in because I loved the toy as a kid, and it kind of made it canon. If you have never heard of a Cap 2, it doesn't matter. If you want to know what it looks like, you can look it up on Wikipedia. You know, when it becomes fanish is when the kind of the reader is expected to know certain things in order to understand either a character or a plot or a kind of development. And that's kind of where it can be dangerous. And like with my Doctor Who fan fiction, when I was writing it as a kid, but also like in my teenage years when Star Wars maybe died away, but I was still involved in Doctor Who fandom, I was writing Doctor Who fan fiction. And it was fan fiction in the kind of like, how many references can I put in that you must understand in order to kind of get the twist, which is a good kind of mental exercise, but that's not what writing fan fiction is about professionally, you know.
Yeah. Now, when you added something like the Cap 2 to Shadow of the Sith, did the editors like call it out? Were they like, oh yeah, you got this in here, great, let's leave it?
Yeah, I think they did see that one. I remember pasting in the Word document comments like a picture of the box. Because I think someone said, "You're like, are you sure the description is accurate?" Because like it's a really weird looking thing. It's like 2 legs and it's like a upside down cone thing of a dome. So they tried to describe it in the book, and they're like, "Are you sure that's right?" So like, here's the box picture. So like, it's accurate. And again, a few things. There's some drinks that I mentioned, which are from the LA Times newspaper strip, and they're like, "Well, can't you? Maybe they can drink something else." And I'm like, "No, I want this drink because it was mentioned." And I pasted it in the panel. And look, there it is. So like again, like it doesn't matter. Like I could have changed it, but some things are just kind of fun.
Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I like asking authors this, is with Star Wars names, how do you come up with them? And do you have any kind of guideline of what makes a good Star Wars name and what makes a bad Star Wars?
Man, it's so difficult with Star Wars because if you get the name right and it sounds like a Star Wars name, you just know. It's like, yeah, that's a Star Wars name. You know it immediately. And then sometimes you're like, oh, I've got a character where you read something else or see something else, and you're like, that doesn't quite work. But you can't figure out why. It's just this kind of weird black magic. My trick, and this is like revealing deep author secret, which maybe I shouldn't, but like, is to take a word and change the vowels in the word. Yeah. And you can change even the most simplest word into something weird. It's especially good for planets, like planets and battles. I've used, like, one of my favorite Doctor Who stories is Marco Polo, which is about the historical character Marco Polo. And it's like, well, if I change the vowels, I can get Mercapula. And Mercapula, which actually is mentioned twice. It's funny, it's mentioned twice in Shadow of the Sith, but spelled differently on both places. My own mistake. But like Mercapula sounds like a cool planet. It's like Mercapula.
Yes.
There's something about it. It's like all I did was change the vowels in Marco Polo. And the rule is like if you change a vowel with an O, like if the O becomes I, then every single O becomes an I. You know, A becomes E. Every single A becomes an E. You don't change it halfway through. Like you stick with it.
Oh,
and
wow.
You can honestly, you can take any word and it can be bizarre. And you just change the vowels. Yes. So like it's a kind of, I don't know if it's a secret or a shortcut, but it works.
It does. I like the idea of if you change one letter to another letter, all those other letters have to change to that letter.
Yeah,
that's a
good.
It's
kind of the rule. It's like it's a rule. So it becomes like it's a Marco Polo to Mercapula. Was brilliant. I was like, yeah, I got to use it. So like, well, I mean, Dathan was a friend I had at school, and I always thought he had a cool name.
Yeah,
So I used it.
yeah.
And then when it was revealed that his name was Dathan in the book, I had all these people called Dathan on Twitter going, "How dare you use my name in the Star Wars book?" I was like, I had no idea it was a name. Like I thought it was just like, sometimes you meet someone and they've got an unusual name and you never meet anyone else with the same name. But it's kind of funny because I lost touch with them like years ago. We're talking like 30 years, more than 30 years ago. Like, I hope he likes Star Wars because like he's in Wikipedia. It's like, oh man, he's out there somewhere not realizing that there's a whole Wikipedia entry with his name.
One of the other things I liked about the Shadow of the Sith is the planet environments. They felt very Star Warsian. There's the one that is poisoned by the ion drives of the downed Mon Calamari ship. And then there's that kind of ship graveyard moon. When creating a Star Wars environment, what do you think about in creating it?
I wanted them to be very different because, again, right from the early stages of the book, it was going to be a chase or kind of a journey across multiple locations. And the way I wrote it in my mind was like, well, this is going to be episode 6.5, like between Return of the Jedi and between The Force Awakens. Imagine this was just like a cinematic experience. What would you expect in a new Star Wars movie that kind of fills that really important gap in the kind of storyline? So if they were going to go across different planets, each planet had to be very different. I wanted a speeder bike chase because you'd have that in the Star Wars movie. So I had the planet, I can't remember the name of it, some moon or a planet. It's kind of like a desert and there's canyons, kind of multicolored canyons, and there's this kind of lake. And there's like there's the Imperial refueling depot, which is very kind of concrete, and it's nighttime and it's floodlit, just like deep shadows and harsh concrete lines and things. And then there's Kaiser's world, which is a kind of graveyard, kind of bathed in a red light of the nebula, the kind of hell space, whatever they call it, that protects Exegol from the rest of the galaxy. So I was
I love how I'm sorry. I loved how you phrase that. Protects Exegol from the rest of the galaxy. When you said it, I actually heard that the nebula was protecting the rest of the galaxy from Exegol,
wow.
Which is kind of a truth.
Yeah.
Talking about the chase scenes and your action scenes all did have a very cinematic feel. And as you're talking about that speeder chase, I can still see how Luke and Lando split up and they're each facing their own kind of obstacles as they fight the bounty hunters and crash into the lake. It's just, your words are visually stimulating, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it was... It's a great read. It is a fantastic read and a great addition to the Star Wars library. Especially, one of the things I admire so much about it is that it did reframe my own point of view of looking at Rey and looking at the story that was to come. It, in a great way, sets up everything that's to come without ever hurting it. And I think that's a really agile way of writing. No question there, just a statement.
Well, it's funny because I watched those movies so much when I was writing the book, and especially Rise of Skywalker. It's like just almost frame by frame at certain points to get the detail. Yeah. But then when everything was done, the book was out, like the immediate aftermath of the book releasing, it's like I sat down and had kind of 3 nights to watch the sequel trilogy, like just through, because I hadn't really done it like just as movies. I'd been doing it, it's scene by scene and fast forwarding, rewinding and stuff. And I was really surprised. I was like, wow, these movies actually now feel different, and they kind of they hit differently now. Which I thought, I mean, obviously I was going to change things because there are things in the book that I changed some stuff. Not changed. I kind of gave a different perspective on things that I mentioned in The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker. But I was like, okay, this is quite different now when I watch the movie.
Yeah. I think we're coming up on time, and I just have a couple more questions. If you don't mind if we go over just a touch, if you have them. Because there's so much to talk to you about. This is so exciting. How do you... What are some of the things... You talked about the Cap 2. You talked about your phone number, but what are some of the other things that you were really excited to add to the Star Wars canon?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed expanding existing canon. So, like, I knew I had to have general pride in Shadow of the Sith because he's such a cool character for me and The Rise of Skywalker. So it's not so much adding to canon, but expanding. And again, it's like the action figures, the characters that appear and disappear. He appears out of nowhere in The Rise of Skywalker, and it's like, who is this guy? He's like in charge now. So clearly he was doing something really important, and like we hadn't seen him. So I then thought, okay, he's an imperial officer with a big career, and he even says in The Rise of Skywalker, I served you. I'm talking to Palpatine. It's like I served you in the old wars. It's like, okay, he's like a lifetime imperial officer who has a big career. So I wanted to kind of give him a moment or two in the book, and which well, I mean, it connects him to Rey's story and Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, because it turns out that like he has a kind of connection with her that he doesn't even know about in the sequel trilogy. And to be able to give nods to things as a kind of thank you to people. So one of my favorite authors is in Star Wars is Michael Stackpole, and it kind of goes beyond Star Wars, because when I was starting out as like when I decided to be like a writer, like I'm going to do it as a job, like I want to be a writer properly, not just a hobby. Like I'm going to be a writer. What am I going to do? And this is like about 2006, when I was like, I got to take this seriously. If I want to get anywhere, I'm going to take it seriously. So I kind of was searching for inspiration and guidance and things, and he had a podcast called The Secrets, which was about writing. Like it was him talking about the craft and the business and everything. And I listened to that on the bus to work, in the morning and coming home in the evening. I listened to that and really learned so much. And it was really inspirational in terms of like, I can do this, I can write, I can be a published author. It's my dream come true kind of thing. So when it comes years and years later, it's like, well, I know Mike now, and in Shadow of the Sith, it's like, I joked to him, I said, I kind of want to put you in the book, but I can't just go, oh, the character called like Stecker Polaris. Like that would still be really stupid. And then I thought I can use that because, like, well, it turns out Lando Calrissian has a couple of like really high-end speeders in his ship, and well, guess what? They're the Stecker Polaris Stormwolf model 57 and model something else.
Yeah.
So I managed to get like, so Stecker Polaris is Stackpole, and Stormwolf is his website. His website is stormwolf.com. So it's like, well, these are the Stormwolf models of the Stecker Polaris speeder. So like, it's kind of like a joke that doesn't mean anything to anybody.
Yeah.
And it could be anything and doesn't affect how you read the story or understand it. But like, it's me saying thank you to someone who was a big help and a big inspiration. And by virtue of putting it in a Star Wars book, it becomes this thing we call canon, which is a kind of strange construct where like it's real now in Star Wars.
Now, in your acknowledgments in Shadow of the Sith, you give thanks to Kirsten White, who wrote Padawan, and Mike Chin, who wrote Brotherhood, and you refer to the three of you as the Team Trash Compactor. Where did that name originate?
So we were writing our Star Wars books almost at the same time. It's kind of one of those things where like authors gravitate towards each other and you kind of find stuff out. Like you don't say, hey, I'm writing a Star Wars book, thereby breaking all your non-disclosure agreements and all that kind of stuff. But like you just kind of authors find stuff out. Anyway, so we were doing our Star Wars books all at the same time. And because writing in Star Wars, there's a lot of pressure and there's deadlines and there's so many people waiting for stuff and looking at the book and checking it over and reviewing it, because Star Wars is huge. Like the bigger the property, the more people are involved because it's important. And although they kind of leave you alone to kind of do the book and, because they're busy making Star Wars TV shows and movies and stuff, they're still waiting. And like, you've got an obligation not to keep people waiting. So we kind of felt like this is pressured, and the trash compactor scene in A New Hope was kind of the perfect analogy for that. It's like, well, there's me and Mike and Kirsten and we're kind of Luke, Han, and Leia, and we're trying not to get crushed by the garbage thing, and what's it called? Day and Ogo is like trying to pull us under, and there's that kind of combined camaraderie and stress relief. It's like it's like an outlet. It's like we're Team Trash Compactor. We're going through this kind of experience together. And then they released a Lego set, like a diorama, which is like that scene.
Yeah.
And I remember we were like messaging each other going, "Oh my goodness, have you seen this new Lego set? I gotta go and get one." As a kind of like a memento.
That's awesome. That's a great bonding experience, I would think.
Yeah, it is. And the thing, like any authors kind of gravitate towards each other because there are certain things that we know about the publishing industry, and it's how it works. Because like any job, you have experience of that job, and there are like-minded people who have the same kind of experience, so you can share stuff. And especially licensed fiction like Star Wars or Stranger Things or Doctor Who or whatever, like there are different processes and peculiarities of writing in those different universes that only people who have worked in it know. So the fact that you can kind of all, draw together and whether it's letting off steam or advice and like how to deal with this and how to deal with that and should I do this and should I do that, like it's all useful stuff. Because in the end, we're all just trying to do the best stories that we can because we love writing and we love Star Wars.
Now, I think you got a really interesting era to write in with Shadow of the Sith because it is very open. Like, we don't know much of anywhere from after Jedi to The Force Awakens. If you were given the opportunity to write in any era in the Star Wars galaxy, what era would you like to write in?
It's kind of like so much to choose from.
There
and they all have their own differences. So Shadow was so open because, like you said, like this is a period where we don't know much. If you're doing a story set much more within the framework of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy or the Clone Wars or something much more restricted, then it's a different kind of book because you've got to then fit it in with everything else and tell a different kind of story. I mean, I was lucky with Shadow because there are so few opportunities where you can write something that is so open. I would love to write kind of like the Old Republic and even further back, which is interesting because like at the moment it kind of doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Story-wise. I mean, obviously there's loads of expanded universe and legend stuff. I used to play the Old Republic massively multiplayer online role-playing game. Not Knights the Old Republic, but the Old Republic. And it's kind of like a really interesting era. And, we're going to get that movie at whatever point of Dawn of the Jedi or whatever it's called. So perhaps that section of the mythology will open up. I think Star Wars is almost unique in that we have an ongoing storytelling thing which covers a whole load of different eras concurrently. You've got the High Republic. You've got Shadow of the Sith, which is set hundreds of years after the High Republic. You've got comics and books set within the original trilogy. You've got them set within the prequel trilogy. The way that we can kind of go back and forth into different eras of Star Wars and different time points and tell more stories I think that's unique.
So what are the 3 top elements that make Star Wars to you?
So it's a kind of lived-in second-hand universe feel, like we talked about, like levers and buttons and things.
Yes.
To me, it's science fiction, but fantasy as well. And people argue about whether it's science fiction or fantasy or space fantasy or science fantasy or whatever. It's a blend of those, which I think is really important. And I think other stories have that, obviously, but it just kind of works in Star Wars. And the third one is the kind of scope of Star Wars, that you can tell any kind of story. And you can apply, as we said right at the beginning, you can apply genres within the Star Wars universe, and it's still Star Wars. It could be horror or Western or a samurai movie or a thriller. You can do romance. You can write YA and middle grade and adult, and it all kind of fits together. It's still Star Wars. It's one continuous evolving narrative, whether we tell stories going forward into the future or we go back, like I just said, into different periods and tell new stories. It's all one thing that kind of fits together, which I think is uniquely Star Wars.
Yeah, that's true. That's very uniquely Star Wars. This I don't know. I equate it to just being a universe unto itself, and within that universe having all the genres that you could want. It's a storytelling universe.
Yeah. It's the biggest. I think it's probably the biggest modern mythology that we have.
Yeah.
Which is wild. It's like it came out of the imagination of one guy, George Lucas. And then from then, all the creators special effects,
absolutely.
monster makers, creature workshops, all that kind of stuff that helped bring his vision together to create this gigantic thing.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how, and this speaks to the monster makers and the model makers, how the effects from a movie from 1977, a movie from 1980, and a movie from 1983 hold up against movies that come later, even like movies that are in 87, where you're like, why are these effects not that great when 4
This
years
is the
ago we
weird
had?
thing. It's like, yeah. You can watch a movie from '87 and you can say that movie was made in 1987. Like you can tell,
Yes.
not just the special effects. It feels like it was made in '87. It looks like
Yeah.
it was made in '87. There's something about it which you can't even define, which makes it that. Whereas the original trilogy somehow transcends that. You get glimpses here and there, and it's like, okay, that's definitely a 1977 movie. And then it goes into something else, and you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's so true. It's not only a lived-in universe, it's a living universe in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, my final question for you, Adam. You go to Skywalker Ranch, and there at the gates, George Lucas greets you. What do you say to him?
I would say, just thank you for creating this wonderful thing. I mean, like I said, like it's like, it's so huge now, but the evolution of it from his ideas and his original storylines. And you go back, you look at those original storylines and synopses and scripts, and like they're very different to what became A New Hope. But you can see the changes over time. And then when it came to people kind of realizing his vision, he was a director and producer and whatever, but like he relied on other people. And then as they got successful and more successful, he built a huge team. ILM was created for Star Wars. This whole industry that he created. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I'd be like, thank you very much.
Yeah. It's it's shocking how at every turn it seemed like he was reinventing film just to create these movies.
Yeah. It's almost like we don't give him enough credit, which is strange because he created Star Wars and he is the maker and he's so familiar to all of us. Everything, the sneakers he wears, we know everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, you know what? He created Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's like, I was at Star Wars Celebration, my first one, which was last year in Anaheim. And they had, there's a big mural up on the outside of the convention center with kind of the artwork of Vader and all this stuff. And there was like, I don't know, 100 clone troopers having a photo up outside the fountain. And I was just like, I was there because obviously Shadow was coming out in a month. I was just like, this is created by George Lucas. Like, this is one guy's idea. Yeah. And I kind of like, what if, I try to imagine what that's like. What if there was this huge convention based on my first book? Like, with everything. Like, that would just be the most ridiculous and impossible thing. And like, look at us, like behind you, all your Star Wars stuff, and behind me, all the Star Wars Legos. Like, here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
In this universe.
Imprinted on our DNA is THX 1138. I think.
Right, exactly.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for sharing what Star Wars means to you. It was a pleasure talking to you. I loved your views on how we can reframe the stories to take in new points of view and see it from a different way. And I really appreciated your time. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
May the Force be with you.
Oh, thank you. And you too.
So that's what Star Wars means to Adam Christopher. You can follow Adam on Twitter and Instagram at GhostFinder and on Blue Sky at adamchristopher.me. You can find all these links in the podcast show notes as well as a link to his website. What Star Wars movie have you watched the most? Do you think any genre could be in the Star Wars universe? And what was your favorite part of Shadow of the Sith? Get in on the conversation on Twitter or Instagram at Star Wars Mean to You. That's at Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. And by the way, we're on Blue Sky now too. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. If you're liking the show, please give a 5-star rating and review. And remember, the Force will be with you, always. Hi, this is Dave, And before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.